Welcome back and thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And now to our interview with the guest of the day. I am joined by a political scientist and associate professor at the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies, University of Lagos, Kayode Eesuola, for discussion on the coup in Niger Republic as the junta agrees to negotiate with ECOWAS. Thank you so much for joining us, Prof. It's good to see you again, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening to you. So the latest development on this issue is that the junta in Niger Republic have now agreed to negotiate with ECOWAS over this impasse. How promising is this?
Let me start by saying that the shift in position is not unexpected. Not unexpected because if you have studied the dimensions of coup and coup planners across the world, they always start from the very strong position. But because they are human beings too, they have structures and institutions around them, as well as traditions and religions. In the case of Niger, they will listen to one or two voices and then decide to take a soft approach. The same way ECOWAS started by threat and then decided not to immediately implement the threat and go for dialogue. What this tells you significantly is that in international relations, diplomacy is key. In international relations, states are perceived to be sovereign. International organizations or sub-regional organizations like ECOWAS will have to recognize the sovereignty of the state before taking position. So it's a welcome development. It's not unexpected. One, on the part of the junta, agreeing to engage in dialogue. And on the part of ECOWAS for not using the 1 week ultimatum given as that which is crafted in iron. That being said, I think it is promising. Promising in the sense that we are now going to allow conversation between the delegates of ECOWAS and the military coup planners, junta, as it were, in Niger. On that table, what will transpire will be, why did you do what you did? And then responses will be given. Sometimes you may find some logic so compelling that you have no option to take a position that is different from what you plan to take. That is why it is called negotiation. So it is promising. We are likely to see a situation in which the juntas will make it clear why they took the decision that they took, especially on the logic that the ruling class in that country is anti-people, is a slave to the West. Those points have been made so far, both on the regular and the social media. Now, whether that will be enough for them to truncate the democratic process will also be on the table. This has happened. How do we get out of here? Is there going to be a program? For how long? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, within which the perceived issues will be corrected and then you return into democratic rule? Will probably be an option. And who knows? Another option could also be, okay, we have heard your voice and we're going to give up immediately, maybe for another election or something. I mean, it's a negotiation. Even if you have the wisdom of Orunmila, there's no way you can predict what is going to happen. The only thing that you can predict and that is promising is that negotiation, not arm, will be at play. Discussion, not ammunition, will take decision at the end of the day. And I think it is good for ECOWAS. It is good for Africa. It's good for Nigeria and Niger. It's good for the world as a whole.
All right, so what do you think could have been responsible for the change on the part of the coup leaders? I mean, before now, they were vehemently against a dialogue or meeting with ECOWAS delegation.
Do not forget that when you say the military, you are talking about human beings like you and I who are parts of the society. Apart from their uniform, the profession to which they belong. They also have family members. They have religious organizations. They belong to community associations that have strong traditions. Okay? All these social factors cannot but have effect or impact on some of them and their leaders as they proceed in the process of what they call saving their countries. You remember that at a point in time, a delegation that was strictly formal was sent in there, and that delegation came back with nothing. But then softer ones like religious groups, traditional groups went there and spoke with alternative voices. And of course, we're now getting to see some results. And that's why I told you it's not unexpected. There are strong social structures that can be used to resolve issues. That's the lesson for me we need to learn from here. Particularly, if you understand the politics of Niger, as well as the political environment of both Niger and Burkina Faso, there is something they call rakire, which is in French called plaisanter, parente à plaisanterie. That phrase in French means joking relationship amongst nationalities, sub-nationalities, and clans within the system. UNESCO recognizes that that system alone in Niger and Burkina Faso is used to resolve 83% of internal conflicts before they get to the court. I see that play in this situation. And I believe strongly that it is one of the things that you can hold responsible for the sudden reverse of the decision. What Africa needs to learn from this is that we have autochthonous ways of resolving conflicts, and we should explore them more than relying on the Western pattern that appeared to be either war or dialogue. Only two options are on the table. For me, this lesson is clear and we need to imbibe it, but it is not unlikely that these social structures that I'm giving to you, religion, culture, tradition, civil society, persuasions, and all these, are responsible for the sudden change of. I don't even call it sudden. Anybody who's going on negotiation table will have plan one and plan two, plan A and plan B. Maybe when perhaps they saw that force alone will not be able to resolve this issue, they will, resort to other approaches that have sociological touches, as I've explained. That's my thinking.
All right, Prof. We will get back we'll definitely talk about the other options available for ECOWAS. But then still on this delegation issue, the co-leaders cited the sanctions imposed on Niger without hearing their own story, as one of the reasons for not meeting with ECOWAS leaders. How plausible is this excuse?
Well, you see, in politics and administration, sometimes actions that you take in public are to give certain messages. There's no way anybody can fault the decision of ECOWAS for one, asserting clearly that coup is not tolerated within the sub-region, and that two, anybody who engages in coup will have appropriate sanctions. There have been conventions, there have been protocols that have been signed to back ECOWAS on this. So that decision was appropriate, but it is appropriate to the extent that room is given for negotiation. It's not cast in iron, it's not cast in bronze. The sanctions that were given were to signal the world that ECOWAS does not, at least in theory, support military or forceful takeover, and that the sanction is an indication of the steps taken to demonstrate that to the entire world. After these two, the subtext to them is to know that negotiations can occur through culture, through religion, through tradition, through clannish sentiment, and like I told you, the rakire which between Niger and Burkina Faso is very strong, and that is called Parente a Pleasantare. So that's the way to go for ECOWAS, and that's also the way to go for the junta in Niger.
But Prof, these coup leaders refused to meet with the retired General Abubakar-led delegation, but they've been meeting with clerics from Nigeria. What does this tell us?
Well, it tells you what I just said, that sometimes you don't use hardline, book-based idea to resolve issues. We are in Africa. Whether you are in Niger or Burkina Faso, Benin Republic of Nigeria, you are Africans. In Africa, there are structures for conflict resolutions. These structures are autochthonous and they are more productive, as you have seen in this case. They are more productive in resolving issues than the book-based, highly legalistic ones that ECOWAS wanted to use in the first realm. You ask me, who will I ask? They went with generals who came with the idea of, if you don't take it, I force you out of the way. And they told them, go to hell and burn into ashes. You will not dictate to us in our own country. But then, thanks to the wisdom of sending an alternative power, it's a power in its own right, alternative power, softer power, of course, power that is rooted in the sociology of the two countries and the continent of Africa. Use sentiment of religion, which our people hold in a high esteem. Use sentiment of we speak the same language. In Nakwana, Nago, they will speak the same language. The whole tradition, they refer to proverbs, sayings, indigenous knowledge systems. All these things we put together to whip up sentiment and, of course, beat them into thinking otherwise beyond the pig-heady approach that they initially adopted. I think the lesson to learn, which I must emphasize here, is that beyond the book-based idea, beyond the sacrosanct use of force, there are structures that are sociological within African communities that we can use to resolve our contradictions and controversies, as well as conflicts and crises within the society. I think it's high time we started adopting them more than the ones we read on the pages of paper. If we apply this to terrorism, I see it work better. If we apply it to most of the problems we have, even kidnapping and all this, I see it work better. Force does not do it all. That's the lesson we need to learn from here.
All right. So before this recent developments, ECOWAS had ordered the activation of its standby military force in the Niger Republic if the coup leaders refuse to restore constitutional order. Is this still on the table? And now that the coup leaders have agreed to negotiate with ECOWAS?
Well, like I've said, ECOWAS needs to demonstrate seriousness to the world. Public speech, public face, and that is appropriate. You make a pronouncement that you condemn an action. You trigger what you call sanctions, and you go beyond that by keeping a standby force. It's not a stand-in, mark you, if there's any phrase like that. It's not a force that is going in immediately. It's on standby. It's a way of saying that, look, if all approaches fail, do not forget that we have this on standby. We may use it when it becomes necessary. So again, this is correct on the part of ECOWAS. It is correct in terms of the theories and practice of international relations, as well as diplomacy. But then beyond this public space, the subtexts that have been used are also perfectly correct. And it's a matter of time we're going to see, as I'm emphasizing, that internal mechanism, cultural mechanisms, sociological mechanisms there are within African societies that can be used to resolve our contradictions beyond the very legalistic idea of war and sanctions, as well as standby forces. I think it's a win-win in this situation.
I'd like us to also talk about the threat to kill the post-president Bazoum if military action is launched. Are they capable of carrying out these threats?
Well, you cannot underrate somebody who holds the gun. My good friend Ruth First will always remind us that power lies in the barrel of the gun. When a man is in possession of ammunition, is intoxicated, there's a placebo effect, there is the stimulation of the central nervous system that makes him do or her do whatever that needs to be done at any point in time. So I will personally not underestimate the juntas because they have the barrel of the gun. But whether they will actually carry that out or not is what I will put as 50-50. The first 50 will be that if it is decided that force and only force will be used on us, then we escalate the situation by making it impossible for anybody to return this person to power. In that case, the man could be killed. But the other 50, which interestingly for us and luckily for us, the junta also considered, is the approach of, not using force. And that is why that we may kill. Now that ECOWAS is getting the opportunity of dialogue, of jaw instead of war, I don't think that threat will hold anymore. After all, from all the speeches that they have made, we have read, that we have been reading as well, there is no part that says they have pathological hatred for the person of Mr. President of Niger. I have not read anything like that. What I have read is the misgovernance, the sheer arrogance, the kleptomaniacal character of the state, as well as the unholy alliance and dependence with France. These are ideologically correct. And I think one thing that ECOWAS needs to learn from here is to, beyond this post-event action, is to begin to interrogate the quality of governance across the member states. The same energy you expend in deploying military, sending delegates to countries to resolve coup issues could also be expended on going into countries to ensure that governance is done, to ensure that stealing by the ruling class of that country is minimal, to ensure that yearnings and aspirations of the ECOWAS people are at least to the minimum met by their government. If you have an ECOWAS that adopts this soft approach, who will find its way out of the system? So the use of threat, the use of sanction and force are correct for the purpose of making public statements. But beyond this, the post-Niger crisis ECOWAS needs to learn that ECOWAS as a sub-region should rise beyond just visiting when coup occur. It should be interested in how independent states are governed by their sovereign leaders. After all, ECOWAS is primarily an economic organ before it is political. If the economic situation in ECOWAS countries are threatened, coups and counter-coups will always occur. So I have advocated it elsewhere, perhaps on your own program or elsewhere, that the unit that urgently needs to be created in ECOWAS is that which deals with governance across ECOWAS states. If there are no institutional coups anymore, by that I mean presidents of ECOWAS countries manipulating constitutions to elongate themselves in power, if there are no such things anymore, if there is reduction in kleptomaniac leadership, if the ruling class now exists for the yearnings and aspirations of the people, if the reward system is balanced, okay, and the society is fairly egalitarian, you are not going to have coup. But even when you have coup will become an abnormal situation that even the citizens themselves will condemn. But when you have a situation like we do now, when in which there are coups, and then citizens stand up as if they don't study democracy in school, as if they don't know that military government is an aspiration, as if they don't know that the democracy is all about freedom and everybody needs it. But in spite of having all this knowledge, where they stand up and they jubilate in support of military dictators who seize power by force, what it tells you is that something is fundamentally wrong with the way and ways countries of ECOWAS are governing themselves. This is a lesson that we must learn from post-Niger crisis.
All right. But Prof, looking at where both parties were before this recent developments, can ECOWAS trust them to honor any agreements reached with them?
This is not a matter of trust. I personally don't think so. I think this is a matter of diplomacy and as well as a matter of negotiation. You look at the complications on the table. I mean, we've been following the trend very closely. You see many citizens of Niger saying that if they need to come and attack the military junta in their country, they will first need to attack all the citizens of Niger. They write it, they demonstrate it. You see stadia where people gathered and you see the crowd and you see this support. How will you use force on this kind of people? You want to start getting to a country and start shooting all the people? Then you are going to, eventually get into that very crisis that you want to avoid in the first place. Democracy is all about the people. So trust is not the issue anymore. I think it should even be the reverse of whether the junta and the citizens of Niger will trust ECOWAS enough to always be interested in the yearnings and aspirations of the people in the country, much more than their fellow presidents in power. The allegation on the table now, truth be told, is that an average ECOWAS citizen, especially across the Francophonie, is of the opinion that ECOWAS is a club of heads of state. And that club is only interested in protecting the interests of the member presidents, not the people of the different countries that represent ECOWAS. That is the feeling of the polity across Francophonie in majority at this point. And of course, you remember Fela Anikulapo Kuti's song, Underground System. This was also alluded to. I think, again, I'm emphasizing that post-Niger crisis, I don't see it go beyond this, but post-crisis, ECOWAS needs to sit down and readdress the issue of governance across the member states. If you have to wait for coups to occur before you now start sending soldiers and forces to the coup, you are going to aggravate the situation, kill people, destroy lands and property, and of course, probably destroy the economy of the ECOWAS that you are supposed to be protecting and building.